Back to another edition of the Magic Latest podcast where we discuss everything Orlando Magic basketball. I'm your host, Jalon Dixon, and today we're going to get into Summer League with Orlando's Summer League season kicking off tonight at 7:30 against the Sacramento Kings. Then move on to the NBA Cup group announcements, including the fact that the Orlando Magic might have the most favorable group of all three in the Eastern Conference. Move to Anthony Simons, apparently on the block for the Boston Celtics after being acquired by them from the Portland Trailblazers, and end on an interesting online debate about the battle between Paolo Banchero versus Jalen Williams, J-Dub from the Oklahoma City Thunder, in terms of who would you start a franchise around. Let's get right into today's podcast. But remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content. And let's get right into it. Starting off with Summer League, as I mentioned beforehand, at 7:30 tonight, Jace Richardson and Noah Penda finally make their Summer League debuts against the Sacramento Kings at 7:30 today. Obviously, we've talked about what we want to see from Jace Richardson and Noah Penda in terms of what they can produce on the floor. Obviously, for Penda, Swiss Army knife, ability to play multiple positions at guard and space. Jace Richardson, we want to see you be able to create shots off the dribble, be able to shoot the three ball at a high clip, and be a dangerous on ball scorer. That's right, right? Those are the two things that are given. The players that I want to watch on the Sacramento Kings in this game starts with Devin Carter from Providence 2 seasons ago, was a defensive stopper type that was kind of in that Davion Mitchell type of mold and was a guy that didn't play too many games last season due to coming into the season injured. Neat Clifford, an interesting combo wing out of Colorado State that was on the radar for the Orlando Magic and was going to be an interesting pick back when they had a dang near lottery pick before trading it to the Memphis Grizzlies. Another player that I thought was really interesting, a guy that came up on our perfect prospects conversation, Maxime Reynard, out of France, aka played at Stanford and was a 20-10 guy, one of the only guys in college basketball to average a double-double. Those guys are the most intriguing to me, with a honorable mention being Mason Jones, a G League standout, a guy who's been a G League MVP, a guy who has stood out on a multitude of different levels on the G League in the G League space as a high-level scorer and shot creator, and a guy who feels like he's always in the mix to be called up to play on a roster every single season with the way that he produces at the G League level. Those four guys are going to be the most interesting to watch matchup wise when it comes to taking on the Sacramento Kings. I am not necessarily going to predict any stat lines for Jace Richardson or Noah Penda, but I would like to see double digits from Jace Richardson in particular. And my main goal, if I could provide a objective, right, like a 2K my player objective of sorts for either of these players, I would say I would like to see Noah Penda grab at least 5 rebounds and create 2 defensive opportunities. That's basically stocks, right? 2 steals, 2 blocks, 1 steal, 1 block, some combination of those. I would love to see that from Noah Penda. So 5 rebounds and some version of getting 2 stocks, whether that's 2 steals, 2 blocks, or 1 steal and 1 block apiece. And for Jace Richardson, I would like to see double-digit points. I'm talking at least 10 points, and I would like to see anywhere between 4 to 6 3-point attempts. I think this is going to be huge because it maximizes the understanding of what these two guys bring to the table and what will be the attributes that get them on the main roster sooner in terms of being able to produce at a high level. Jace Richardson's ability to get 4 to 6 3-point shot attempts up and get anywhere between 10 to 12 points in a hurry is going to make him an instant six-man type of candidate, even with the kind of rotation that the Orlando Magic have in the backcourt. Same can be said for Noah Penda in terms of if he can be a high-level rebounder at his size at 6'8", 6'9", and grab 5 boards and have 2 stocks or more. His versatility makes him a player that they can give 12, 14 minutes to and know that he can be highly productive in short spurts. So that would be my main objectives for those two guys going into Summer League. Not necessarily worried about win, lose, or draw. That's not really important in the Summer League, especially for a team like Orlando that's only really got their draft prospects and then a handful of just other guys trying to make rosters on the team. So there's not really a big effect on the main Orlando Magic squad coming out of Summer League outside of these two guys mainly being productive. So with that being said, you guys let me know in the comment section down below, what are your expectations for Jace Richardson and Noah Pinda throughout this Summer League season? And if you have any 2K objectives for Jace Richardson and Noah Pinda going into their debut against the Sacramento Kings, drop it in the comment section down below. I wonder how many of you guys have higher expectations, lower expectations, or right on the same par as me for what you think these guys should do in their first game of the Summer League season. Moving on, let's talk about the Orlando Magic, who are now officially placed into a group cup for the NBA Cup next season, or excuse me, placed into a group for the NBA Cup next season. And I would say that they have one of the most favorable groups in the Eastern Conference, like very, very bluntly. For the Orlando Magic, they were placed into Group B alongside the Boston Celtics, the Detroit Pistons, the Brooklyn Nets, and the Philadelphia 76ers. Just for context sake, I will name the other groups just so you can get an understanding of what else is going on. In the East A group, that is Cleveland, Indiana, Atlanta, Toronto, and Washington. That's an interesting one. Indiana's still a pretty solid squad. Cleveland, we know who they are. Atlanta just significantly upgraded. And Toronto is a pretty good squad on any given night. Washington is obviously in a rebuilding stage. Group C is New York, Milwaukee, Chicago, Miami, and Charlotte. Again, also another really interesting one because you still have to watch out for Milwaukee if Giannis is going to be there. Chicago is a rebuilding team that's building themselves up. Miami is always a tough out, and Charlotte is starting to play defense. So if they can have a healthy LaMelo Ball, who knows? Let's focus on the Orlando Magic's group with Group B, though. That's the most important, right? That's what we're here for. When it comes to Group B for the Orlando Magic, not only do I think they can win this group, I think they are easily the best team in this group going into next season. I'll do you one step better. I am going to rank the 5 teams in Group B, including the Orlando Magic, in terms of not only their ability to win the group, specifically, because of course, obviously there's group play and then there's the elimination stages and everything else. But I'm also going to rank them based off of their championship quality going into next season. The Orlando Magic are number 1. At number 2, I'm taking the Detroit Pistons because the Detroit Pistons were a team on the rise last season and are a team that I feel like is only going to further improve with internal development. And I am not as worried about their injury history concerns as a team like the Philadelphia 76ers. Next, I will put the Philadelphia 76ers, though, because at the end of the day, they have a group when you also add back in Jared McCain. You have Paul George. You have Joel Embiid. You have Tyrese Maxey, of course, right? You bring back Kyle Lowry this summer. You're in a really interesting position where if you can be healthy, Philly really should be considered as like a top 5 team in the Eastern Conference if they're able to put it all together. Really top 4 or top 3 even. Like, Philly, when healthy, should be a team that's on par with teams like the Orlando Magic, with teams like the Cleveland Cavaliers and the New York Knicks. Like, when healthy, on paper, this team should be on par with those squads. The issue is they're never healthy, right? Or at least their main guys are not healthy most of the time. Next is the Boston Celtics. Obviously, they're going to be without Jason Tatum, but they still have Jaylen Brown, still have Derek White. You bring in Anthony Simons, you may potentially be able to get something depth piece wise for him if they truly are shopping him to reflip him, as many other reports are saying. We'll talk about that in a segment in the next segment. And then, of course, ending with the Brooklyn Nets, who idiotically drafted 5 players, along with 3 of them being international or project level point guards that are going to take real development. Not to mention they traded Cam Johnson this summer. So they're a team that obviously wants to tank. So for reference again, my ranking of the teams in Group B: Orlando, Detroit, Philly, Boston, Brooklyn. You guys let me know in the comment section down below. Did my ranking hit the nail on the head? Did I get the rankings correct for Group B? If not, drop your ranking down below. Tell me where I was wrong. And tell me why the Orlando Magic are still going to win it regardless of if I was wrong or right. Because let's be honest, the Orlando Magic are definitely the best team in this group. And I'm not going to say it's not even close, but it's a pretty significant margin, especially if the Detroit Pistons are the second best team in many people's eyes. And even if you think Philly is the second best team in many in your personal opinion of this group going into next season, you're banking on Joel Embiid and Paul George to be healthy. I'll take my chances. I'll take my chances. Next, let's go ahead and move on to Anthony Simons with the aforementioned Boston Celtics, who honestly could be higher on this list, um, depending on who you talk to, and it depends on how you feel about the fact that they're also going to be without Al Horford. But we'll talk about that in a different episode. The Orlando Magic could possibly still get Anthony Simons, and that feels very crazy to me. Reports said that the Boston Celtics have been open to having Anthony Simons on the trade block for reflipping from the Portland Trailblazers, depending on what kind of acquisitions they could make. Let me kind of go into some of the other details of what could be interesting here. The trade proposal that was put up on Clutch Points was Anthony Simons for Jonathan Isaac, Goga Batazde, and Tristan Da Silva. This is the idea that not only would Anthony Simons be back on the block, Anthony Simons would be actually in Orlando Magic after 2 to 3 years of speculation for a team that just picked up a big time guard for the Memphis Grizzlies via trade. Let's read some of the interesting thoughts around adding Anthony Simons to this team. Orlando made one of the biggest offseason moves to fix what that problem, talking about the three-point shooting, by trading for Bane. It cost the team 4 first-round picks and a first-round pick swap, Contavious Caldwell-Pope and Cole Anthony. We know that already. That was quite the price to pay for a non-All-Star, but Bane is the exact type player that the Magic need. He's a versatile player who can thrive in any lineup, but most importantly, he is one of the best three-point shooters in the NBA. Simons would add even more shooting and offense to Orlando's rotation. The guard averaged 19.3 points per game last season and he was above 20 points per game in each of the 2 years prior. The IMG Academy alumni gets up greater than 8 3-point attempts per game on average at an efficient clip too. With Banchero, Wagner, Bane, Jalen Suggs, and Wendell Carter entrenched in the starting lineup, Simons could operate as arguably the best six-man in the NBA. If the team pulled off this trade, even after the Bane deal, they would still have plenty of depth and defense on their roster, and they'd have to be looked at as a title contender. Thoughts. Very interesting thoughts, right? Okay, so the first thought is that Anthony Simons, again, like they said in the article, actually would be the dopest six man in the NBA, and I think would be a leading candidate out the gate in the sports books to win six man of the year. I think that would be the first thing. He would be like a Malik Monk type offensive generator for this team. And again, like they mentioned in there, could even be like you think of Malik Monk, you think of Peyton Pritchard, you think of guys like that, offensive guys who come in, give you a spark, give you a punch, give you one big time play that just changes momentum. And it could be one of those things that not only helps your team in terms of the flow state of the game, but it also help you in the flow state of a certain road trip or certain stretch of games, whether it's back to backs, 4 games in 6 nights, things of that nature, right? He can be a guy that can just produce at a high level for a team that needs to have real flexibility, especially at that guard position. I do think that if you go after Anthony Simons, it's an indication that you do not believe that Anthony Black is as productive of a player as you need for the window that the Orlando Magic are in. Because I believe that even if you acquire Anthony Simons, like Tyus Jones is playing. Tyus Jones is playing. Jace Richardson, I think, would definitely be relegated to being primarily a G League player. If you acquire a guy like Anthony Simons, I think Jace Richardson has a chance to end up playing most of his time in the G League this upcoming season, as is, just given the guard rotation with Anthony Black, Desmond Bane, Jalen Suggs, and Tyus Jones. That alone could relegate a guy like Jace Richardson to primarily playing in the G League this season. You bring in Anthony Simons as well, and in this trade package, you're not giving up a single guard. It's Tristan Da Silva, it's Goga Batadze, it's Jonathan Isaac. It's a little interesting. Now, obviously, their front court depth takes a pretty decent hit. It would open space up for Noah Pinda to play small ball four, but you pretty much only have Wendell Carter Jr. and Mo Wagner, who you brought back, in your front court. Paulo Banchero can, of course, play the four and lock down the four. You have Noah Pinda. You still have Franz. Like, their front court is solid, but I would still want to acquire, like, a very, very cheap backup center if I'm going to give up Goga Batadze and Jonathan Isaac in the same trade. Anthony Simons could be a really dope pickup. He still brings everything that you assumed he brought to the table if he was going to be the starting point guard next to Jalen Suggs. Again, this would make you really question the playing time of a guy like Anthony Black, who hasn't necessarily proven a whole lot. Not a high-level three-point shooter, guys that shot between like 33 and 35%. A guy who is a high-level defender, but is coming off as a guy that does not add necessarily anything on the offensive end, which makes it kind of a 4-on-5 when he's on the floor. Not great. Now, if one of your four is Anthony Simons, who spreads the court so much, could that open up further opportunities for for a guy like Anthony Black to be better offensively with more spacing? There's some real validity to that as well, right? But, man, a backcourt room that has Jalen Suggs, Tyus Jones, Desmond Bane, Anthony Simons, then you throw in Jace Richardson and Anthony Black. Dude. I mean, first of all, you definitely have depth for days. But on top of all of that, best backcourt room in the league? In my personal opinion, if they bring in Anthony Simons on top of all of this, best backcourt group in the league, and it might not even be close. Question for you guys on this one. Would you do this trade package for Anthony Simons? Do the Orlando Magic even need Anthony Simons anymore after what we have seen happen so far this offseason with acquiring Desmond Bane and Tyus Jones? Would Anthony Simons just be icing on the cake that's unnecessary, especially given the fact that we'd have to give up two primary bigs in Goga Batadze and Jonathan Isaac, when in reality we could probably trade those guys for different players or potentially package them together to maybe upgrade at this backup center position? There's a lot of different avenues that could be explored there, but let me know in the comment section, would you trade Jonathan Isaac, Tristan Da Silva, and Goga Batadze for Anthony Simons to add to this current roster? Or is Anthony Simons just pretty much overdoing what the Orlando Magic have already done in a pretty strong offseason thus far? Let me know in the comment section down below. And we're going to end with an interesting debate that I saw online earlier yesterday. And it was one that I thought was really interesting because, let's be real, we love comparing young superstars in the league, and these two guys come from very different backgrounds in terms of where they currently sit in their career and the trajectory of their careers moving forward. And there was a debate sparked up on the Orlando Magic Daily. Shout out to Fansided, and shout out to those guys at Orlando Magic Daily. And the writer expressed, let me give him this credit, the writer Brett James posted on Twitter that he believes that Paolo Banchero is a better cornerstone franchise type of player to build around than Jalen Williams, J-Dub, who was just the second best player, and on some nights was the best player, on the Oklahoma City Thunder, who just won a championship. And apparently, according to the article, there was much more uproar around this conversation than he expected. He believed that this was going to be one of those things that everybody agreed with, given the fact that Paolo Banchero is already a number one on a high-level Orlando Magic team, as opposed to Jalen Williams, who is a number two on a very, very good still, right, Oklahoma City Thunder team. I could see why there's pushback there. Jalen Williams, again, was arguably the best player on certain nights, especially in the NBA Finals for the Oklahoma City Thunder. And honestly, had Shea not been so consistent down the stretch of that series, Like J Dub was on his trajectory of like winning NBA Finals MVP, right? Paulo Banchero, though, and this is why I think that this is a debate that's interesting, but I feel like still has I still feel like Brett James has the right answer, which is Paulo Banchero is a number one. He's definitively a number one. Jalen Williams is a very strong number two. He is not a consistent offensive generator. He is not, he, although is a high level 3 point shooter, is not a guy that you want to rely on creating 3 point shot opportunities on a consistent basis. I would not say that Paulo Banchero is a high level 3 point shooter, but he is a guy that gets to the free throw line at a Shea Gilgis Alexander kind of clip when healthy, which means he gets the superstar whistle, right? Already an indication that he can be an MVP caliber player. He's a high level passer, high level creator out of the post, a dude who can create both in transition and in half court situations. I feel like Jalen Williams is a guy who thrives more in transition, but can be a half court generator. I believe that Jalen Williams is probably a better defender, specifically given what we saw this past season, where he showed his versatility enough to even play small ball center for this team when basically every center for this squad was injured. And I would say that the biggest thing that gives Jalen Williams any kind of real edge over Paulo Banchero is probably his defensive versatility, both as a guy who can operate in space and a guy who can play bigger than what his frame actually presents. With that being the case, though, I still feel like Paulo Banchero is a better offensive generator. He's a guy who is more able and capable to get others involved, and he is a guy who also produces at a really high level in playoff moments on a consistent basis. He was easily the most productive guy in both series that the Orlando Magic have played over the last 2 seasons, and he is a guy that I feel like you can efficiently run offense through as he continues to develop a 3 point shot. With that being said, interested to hear what you guys think. I think that the debate between Paulo Banchero and Jalen Williams is actually a lot closer than many would give it credit. I don't think that, as Brett James says in the article, really great article, by the way, definitely check it out. It was super dense. He went through like 4 to 5, maybe even 6 different stages of comparing Paulo Banchero and Jalen Williams in terms of not just how their game produces, but how it would work in terms of building specifically around these two guys. And I think it's a really interesting debate. I think that Paulo Banchero is definitely a more likely player to build around when you think about his overall skill set and overall talent star power. But I do think that Jalen Williams is slept on as a guy who I think could be an interesting number one. Jalen Williams is slowly but surely going to enter the conversation that Jaylen Brown entered when having the conversation between him and Jason Tatum for being a number one, and why a lot of people started putting a lot of rumors around Jaylen Brown going to a team like Atlanta or like Brooklyn to be a number one on a team. Jalen Williams is going to have similar conversations around him. Obviously, I think that he's with the Oklahoma City Thunder for the long haul, but those conversations will be brought up in passing now that he is an NBA champion and a second fiddle on a team that is absolutely stacked and will stay stacked for the next 4 to 5 seasons. But with that being said, this is the end of another episode of the Magic Ladies podcast. Again, remember to like, comment, and subscribe for daily Orlando Magic content. Leave those thoughts in the comment section down below. I will be down there reading everything you guys are saying, and I will be back tomorrow with another episode. Peace.